everybody, it's Stephen and Walter back again for another episode of So Chatty. And today, as you can see in the title, we're talking about rent it, combining embroidery files to make something original. Yes, we have a whole video on that. But before we get to that, let's take a look at what I've been doing and talk about what Walter's been doing. Well, he's been doing things, but it's not that.
Related.
But anyways, here's what I've been doing, and then we'll talk about Walter because I'm more important. Yeah, okay, here we go. So this is what I'm going to show you. I'm going to put in the video today for you to see how to construct this. This is something that's made up of various embroidery files. This is not something that came this way in the files. You know, when you go on to an embroidery project, you'll get files or projects, and they do one thing. But you can, over time, if you've been collecting embroidery files, you can come up with some of your own things. And that's what I've done here. I call it my gnome landscape wall hanging. It's made up of 25 tiles. And the only thing that it originally started off with just the landscape, the fabric in the background. But I thought, well, yeah, that's nice, but you should have something on it. So you know how I like gnomes. And first thing I thought of was the American Gothic gnomes there down near the bottom underneath the sunflower. And because there were sunflowers in that, I sort of looked for some other gnome ones I had that had sunflowers. And so I kind of put some of them on the hills in the background. That might be a river. I don't know. So they're getting their little feet wet. You know, use your imagination. Then I found the ones with bicycles. And if you notice, all of these have a link with sunflowers. It's hard to tell in this picture, but in the little baskets on the bicycles, there are little sunflowers. And then the little gnomes at the top are all holding a sunflower. But I still had a lot of free space or negative space, and I want to fill it in. So what else works with sunflowers? Butterflies. So I found butterflies, but that's one file, but I had to do some manipulation in terms of size and angle. All of this will be in the video today, and it'll also talk about what things I did kind of wrong if I had thought about this more. So if you decide to do something like this, and this is going to be a lot of fun. And a lot of people think when you're using an embroidery machine, really you're just doing somebody else's designs and it's not very creative. Well, no, that's not true. Yes, I'm using other people's designs for my elements, but it's my final product, the way I've used those, that creates what you see here. And then I backed it and I bound it as well. So it's now hanging on the wall. And the other thing I've just started, so you're not going to see much here, if I can get my cursor up here, is I've started my newest Quilt of Valor quilt. It is a pattern. I forget what it's called. I think it's Pathways Across Canada or something like that. It's made up of 6 different blocks. I've got, there are 4 of each of the 6 different blocks. I've done the first blocks, which I think were called basswood. Never heard of that block before. It probably has other names because I have seen this block before. And then this is a tulip block, the next blocks, but there are going to be 3 more of those and then 4 more other designs of blocks, and have to assemble it all. And I don't know what it is with Quilt of Valor patterns, or is it just me? I found mistakes in this, and this is not the first time I've done a Quilt of Valor pattern, a commercial pattern, and I have found mistakes in it. Now, it was a minor mistake I've come across right now. You know, they want you to take a 1.5 by 2.5 inch strip and sew it on to a 1.5 by 4.5 inch strip. This does not have any Y seams in it. Didn't make a lot of sense. Their diagram didn't show it that way either. I think what they meant was a 2.5, not a 4.5. Anyways, that's what I did and it worked. So I was right, they were wrong. Okay, so that takes me to what Walter's been up to. And Walter's been busy being my travel agent. So what have you been doing?
Well, I've been planning the next trip and getting that sorted to England. We're flying to London and spending a few days in London, then taking the train to Birmingham, spending a few days there, and going to the Festival of Quilts while we're there. and then taking the train back to London and spending a couple more days in London, and then we'll fly home.
And then this all happens after my birthday in July, a couple of weeks after it. But Walter says at the dinner table the other night, so I got you. He's been asking me, what do you want for your birthday? What do you want for your birthday? Actually, that's what we ask each other all the time. And the same answer comes from each of us, nothing. But you know you want something. You know, it's your birthday after all. But I mean, there was really nothing that I could think of that wouldn't cost an arm and a leg.
Well, when I was doing planning for this, like, I mean, I needed to get tickets for the Festival of Quilts, which we have now.
Yeah.
And I needed to get train tickets to get to from London to Birmingham and back again, and I've got that now. And then I had to get I already had, prior to our first part of the trip, I had already booked the flight and the hotel rooms, and I already had that. Now I'm just finalizing stuff. So, and then I started looking around. I thought we should do something when we're in London. What we should do.
Because he rudely interrupted me as I was telling the story, we're sitting at the table and he says, okay, I got you a present. And I says, I don't want it until my birthday, because on the day of my birthday is when I like to get my presents. He goes, well, actually you're getting it after your birthday. Okay, now my interest is piqued here. And he's just dying to tell me what it is. I can see. So I said, okay, what you get me?
I got 2 tickets to the ABBA show in the ABBA Voyager show in London.
It's the one where ABBA are avatars. You've probably heard of them.
Avatars.
Well, avatars, yeah, but they are avatars. But anyways, you know, they're fake. They're holograms.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, and ABBA is my favorite group of all time. Yes, I have seen Mamma Mia. We've seen it at least twice. And yes, I have seen the movie many times over. And I've always loved ABBA since I was a teenager. So yeah, so I'm thrilled that we're going there, but leave it to Walter to find the tickets. And he's done the research, and you won't need to go into that right now about the seats, but because it's a long story, we have seats in a balcony, and it's got good sight lines. And you know, mostly this show it's music more than, I mean, they have backup singers, you said, and stuff like that, but it's not like going to see a regular stage play. It's more like seeing a movie in a way, a concert movie, because basically, at least that's the way I'm picturing it. But anyways, it doesn't matter because it's all the rage and trendy, and it's in London, and so we're going. So
yeah, they built a stadium for it, so
yeah,
or a venue for it.
Yeah, well, we could probably need a lot of specialized equipment too for it, since they are holograms. But anyways, yeah. So happy birthday to me. Yeah, it's not yet though. My birthday's not till July, but we're coming to that. So, anything else you've been doing? Anything exciting? No.
Well, what? Just staining the deck.
Well, yeah, you stained the deck, or part of the deck, half the deck. Yeah, he's been a busy boy doing, you know, domestic things. Fiddly dee, I'd break a nail. I don't do those kind of things. Although I got very butch today, transplanting, repotting all of my philodendrons, my COVID philodendrons, because they've been going wild and they're getting root bound. And boy, they were root bound. Whoa, the root clusters in those suckers that I took out.
Did you do the one in the corner too?
Yes. Oh, that was just one big root.
Yeah.
That was just, there was no dirt left in it. It was just a root. Mind you, has it ever been repotted?
Yeah,
did you repot
it
it once?
Years ago,
oh, okay. Well, it's been quite a few years. It was way pre-COVID.
Yeah, probably.
So, you know,
I've been always meaning to redo it again.
10 years. Yeah, it's an old plant because it was his sister's.
Yeah.
And so we've had that plant for...
Well, since 2006.
Yeah, so almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an old philodendron. It's the mother plant, because all the other little philodendrons I have, and I have shown pictures of those periodically on my blog. During COVID, I decided to take cuttings and root them, and it just went from
and
there.
Then you started printing pots.
Yeah, then I started printing all kinds of pots for them, and I wanted to consolidate that. Too many little pots, So we happened to be at the dollar store today, and they had those flower box things that are, rectangular. And I bought 4 of those, and put all the dirt in and everything like that. It'll make things a little easier, keeps things a little neater, I think. And that's the theory. Although my poor little philodendrons, they all got a haircut as well. They got cut back, and I mean, you can't kill a philodendron.
I don't think so.
But if it can, I will. Because yeah, a plant will look at me and just die. Just dry up, wither up, and die. Of course, I have people that tell me that happens to them too. But whatever. But usually philodendrons I'm okay with. They will grow. So anyways, we were doing that day, and we took my quilt over to the spring fair. I entered a quilt, and I don't know. I don't think I've got a hope in hell, but we'll see how that all works out. So I should know before the weekend is done. So come next week, I'll possibly even on Stephen and Walter Live on Sunday, I'll probably know by then. I'll let you know whether I won a big fluffy ribbon or diddly squat. And I'm expecting pretty much diddly squat. And as I've said, if I do win, I'm not in it for the money. It's a whole $20, and I've already donated it back to them. I put it on my form. They could have the money if I won anything. But if it's one of those cheapo field day ribbons we used to get when we were in elementary school on field day, or whatever they called that, track and field day or something, I would be very disappointed. And I will go out and I will buy a great big fluffy ribbon and stick it on it. But I don't think I've got a chance. There's too many quilters in this area. Too many good ones. It's kind of an old girls group. They're not ready for men to be in the competition. They're not going to let them in. Although they're not supposed to know who did the quilts. I don't trust that. I taped my flap. That has my name. I said to fold it over, and it had a little thing that held that fold over, but it kept popping open, so I took a piece of tape and I stuck top of it. They probably won't like that. Probably gets someone will break a nail or whatever on it. Okay, so Sewing with Stephen is as usual Wednesdays, and all are welcome. So come and go as you please. 9 a.m. Eastern time start, runs till 4 p.m. Eastern. La-di-da, la-di-da. It's all in the show notes. Pop-up Sew Day coming up Saturday, June 21st. Walter's going off to an in-person day to see what the weirdos that show up that his are making, whether Witchy Poo will be there.
No, lately they have been sane looking.
You've had the same ones. You didn't have the guy making the straight coats.
Straight jackets.
Or straight jackets. And
we haven't seen him other than that one time.
No, maybe he got caught up in his straight jacket.
Haven't seen the witch since that one time.
Oh, maybe she flew away. Don't know. Yeah, crazy little group he's got. So we're having a pop-up sew day that day. That's June the 21st. Now, another special pop-up sew day is, and you'll hear more about it as we get closer to the date, it's my annual Stephen's Birthday Bash pop-up sew day, July the 12th. It's not technically the day of my birthday, but that's the first Saturday before it. So, yeah, and there will be prizes. And I just got thinking this morning, last time I did the birthday bash, how did I give out the prizes? Because I'm doing it on Zoom, and I've yet to find a program that lets me put everybody's name into it automatically, not having to type everybody in and people come and go. But I'll figure it out. Well, I have an idea in my head how to do it, but we'll see. And we're going to a special sale tomorrow. Rhonda's Quilting Creations.
Tomorrow?
Or Friday. Sorry, this is...
Oh, yeah, I would guess we're going tomorrow. Sorry.
This is actually Thursday. We record this one day ahead. We release it on Friday. Now you know the secret.
Now I forget. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyways, doesn't really matter. So yeah, Saturday we're going off to this annual sale that Rhonda has. It's always a good sale. It's very, very popular. We got to be there first thing. Last time that we went, we were there pretty much near the first of it, and there's already people there. I swear, people camp out in their cars, and she just runs it out of her garage, and in her driveway. She has, a big canopy thing over her driveway and that. but because she operates her shop out of her home. But anyways, there's usually good prices, and I've already been talking to Rhonda and about about recording the event as well to put on YouTube, and she's all for that, and so we will do that. And this time I hope to kind of go around and maybe talk to various people to get their feelings about it, what they're there for, what they're doing, all that kind of stuff. I don't know how much I'm going to buy because I don't need anything particularly.
That's what you always say.
I know I say that and I end up buying anything anyways, but I'm trying to be very, very physically responsible this year when it comes to my fabric buying. Fiscally, I'm trying not to spend a lot of money on fabric. Not because I'm having a money problem, just because I don't see anything anymore that really grabs me.
Yeah.
And plus we are going to the Canadian quilt show on June the 19th.
And then we're going to the festival.
Yeah,
so.
And there'll be all kinds of vendors there. So unless it's something I really, 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 really like, I'm not dropping the money on it. Now, one thing I'm going to look is to see what she may have in wide backs, because wide backs are always something that I need. And
well, last year she had a lot.
Yeah, she did.
Last time we went.
And her prices on wide back are really good. Wide back's expensive. It's the average price for wide back now here in Canada, or in our area anyways, is usually $32 a meter, and you need a minimum of 3 meters. So, bang, right off the bat, it's $100 for one quilt. And sometimes the selection is really quite crappy too. Like, yeah, you might as well just piece your backing, and I don't like piecing backings. But anyways, we'll see what she's got. That might be more my focus, but you never know. So yeah, so we'll be putting up whatever video that I make for that next week. May put it up on So Chatty, because we haven't done it yet. We keep telling you we're going to make a bag, and Walter's going to show me how to make a bag properly. Yeah, we haven't quite got there yet. Sorry, but we will. Okay, so that's what's coming up. So I guess the main event today is to show you how to put together what I showed you at the very beginning. And along the way, you're going to hear about little oopsies that I made, because mostly planning.
You make oopsies?
No, there wasn't a mistake on the quilt. It was the way that I did it. And there were better ways to do what I did. I sometimes do the simplest things with the grace of complexity. You don't have to agree with that, but you will. Anyway, so yeah, so I'm going to put that video in here right now for you, and then we'll come back and say bye-bye. I'm going to start a new project, but I'm going to do something I've never really done before, and that is to take several different embroidery patterns, files, and combine them together to create a scene. So I have this one by Creative Kiwi. As you can see, it's called In the Hoop Landscape Quilt, and it has all these rows in different colors that create this basic landscape. But what I want to do to it is add some other embroidered elements to it, so I get something like this. Ignore where it says 4x4, 5x5, etc. This is my mock-up of this. So I've got 3 other embroidery files that I want to incorporate on top of this landscape. Now, I don't think it'll be any problem with the little gnomes with the sunflower and the sun itself. But the big gnomes in the center, the American Gothic gnomes, that's going to be more difficult. And here's why. This is all done as a series of tiles. I don't know if you can see this very clearly, the division, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 5 tiles to create a piece that's about 45 inches by 45 inches across. So this will be a wall hanging. Now, I have designed it so that these gnomes with the sunflowers and the sun itself can be embroidered right on top of those tiles. So that's not a problem. But the main focal point, the American Gothic gnomes, those take up 9 tiles all the way across. So I'm thinking I may have to
embroider these out separately, and then applique the finished embroidery to the top of the quilt when I get the pieces all together. That's what I'm thinking right now. This is going to take a while to do, so what I'll do is I'll make some videos showing it step by step what I'm doing. And the first thing I need to do is, first of all, get my fabrics, and I'm going to try and stick to pretty much their color scheme here and do the bottom couple of rows, well, actually do tiles. I think these are labeled as A, B, C across, whatever. Get those bottom ones done, and maybe one of these other tiles that I have the embroidery on, check that out, and we'll see from there. So this is an experiment, and I'll keep you informed. So I've picked out my colors now, and I've got more colors that I actually need, but I want to have a nice selection of sort of gradient colors. So I'm starting in the order at the bottom of this picture and moving my way to the top, and you can see here are my colors. And as I said, I have more than I need. I have, I think, more green and more blue than I really need, but we'll see how that works out when I start doing the embroidery, because these pictures don't always give you an absolutely accurate visual of what it's going to look like with the patterns that you pick, or with the fabrics you pick. And speaking of patterns, I picked fabric that has texture, and most of them come from the same line. There's a couple that don't, but I think they'll blend in okay. So I think this is what I'm going to use for the background. It's not a realistic color scheme for a background, but then again, I'm not going for realism here. I'm going for something that'll catch the eye and is cute. Now, 2 pages from the instruction booklet for making this landscape that I think will be very, very handy are these. This one shows you the number of fabrics and identifies them. And they have 10, and I've actually picked out 11 fabrics. So I may have room to get rid of one of the fabrics. We'll see. But this one is very important because it shows you all 25 tiles, and they've labeled them A, B, C, D, etc. right up to Y. So that's the order that I'm going to do these in, and it'll help keep me straight when it comes to organizing my appliques or my embroidered pieces that are going on top of this as well. So I have all the files loaded into my embroidery machine, and I have set it in the mode that I find is the easiest way to keep big pieces like this separate, and that's the mode that has the description and a picture of the piece. And you can see these are all marked as 8 by 8. That is not the actual size of the tile. They'd be slightly smaller than that, more like 7 something a piece. But it also tells me the hoop I'm going to need, which is the 20B. This is a Janome 550E machine. And the first tile I want to do is the A tile. So I'm just going to load that. And it positions the hoop where it needs to go. And you'll see up here that it tells me this is a 7.8 by 7.8 inch block that we're making. And that's what all of them will be with the 20B hoop. And that's the largest I can go with this particular design. So I will set this so I can see the basic outline, and the first thing that we need to do is do that basic outline of where I'm going to lay my fabric and my batting, because there will be batting in each one of these layers. So I will come back to this and show you how this looks when it's set up.
So the first stage of this is to get my no-show mesh stabilizer. That's what I'm using. 2 layers of that in my hoop, and I have them here as you can see. And I have threaded my machine with black thread. I want something that's a contrast, because when you put these pieces together, you're working from the back and you want to see your stitching guideline very clearly on the back so you don't stitch them together incorrectly. So the first thing it's going to do is do this basic outline for my batting, and I'm using Battleizer,
which is a low loft type of batting. I use it all the time when I make something like a wall hanging or when I do a table runner or that kind of thing. So this is what the machine is going to stitch out for us right now. Now, I'm not sure exactly what the whole point is of those little indented lines on each side. I'm sure I'll figure that out in a minute, but I didn't really realize when I read the instructions, I didn't see them talking about that. But this is probably important. So we'll find out why it's important in just a second when this is finished stitching out. And I'll take a look in the instructions to see what it tells me about that. But I didn't really see anything that mentioned why it's doing that. It must be for centering something. So this is just coming up and finishing right now on this part. So the next stage of this, and I notice I've got a little bit of my stabilizers in our shot here, is to put my batting down on the top. You could take the hoop out for this, but you don't really have to. Make sure those lines are covered. And we're going to do stitch number 2, which is interesting because stitch number 2 is doing two things at once. It's going to tack down the batting, and it's also going to put a couple of placement lines on this as well for the fabric. So we'll start that up. So when this is finished stitching what it is doing right now, I will take the hoop out of the machine. I will not take the embroidery piece out, but I'm going to trim the batting right up close to that perimeter line. And now it's going to put these extra lines on here, which are placements for the fabric that we'll be using. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Or I might be lying to you because now it's doing this, it's going over it twice, which gives it a little bit of extra security. Now, once we have done the very first block, most of the blocks are going to be pretty much the same. So I don't think I'm going to have to record each block because there are 25 blocks. It's going to take a while. But you'll get the idea just by seeing this first one. But we will do the entire first block together so you can see how you lay down the fabric with those placement lines. Okay, so it should be putting the placement lines down right now, and it is. So there's the first placement line, and now it's traveling down to the next placement line. Okay, so I'm going to take my hoop out, and I'm going to trim all the way around the perimeter
as close as I can. And I'm going to use my duckbill applique scissors for that. And you have seen me do this before on other applique projects as well. So I will do that, and then we'll show you the next stage. So I have trimmed my batting, and now I've taken my first color, which according to the chart in the instructions is fabric number 3, and fabric number 3 for me is this orangey yellow color. And I've also changed my thread, my top thread, to an orangey color that'll go with this as well. And what it's going to do is going to tack down this piece of fabric, and it's going to also put the quilting lines in this, and all done in that same color of thread. Now, I will be trimming this after the whole block is done, and that's why there is an excess amount of fabric beyond the seams of, or beyond the outline of where the batting goes. I want to have about a 1/2 inch or more allowance right now for that. It will be trimmed back to 1/2 inch from that outside line later. I'm also going to trim this bottom piece off in preparation for the next piece of fabric that will go down. So let's let it do that. So now it has completed the outline, and now what it's doing is the quilting. And the quilting for this is very, very simple. It's just basically wavy, straight lines across the piece. And that's basically the reason why you use the batting, the battleizer, because it makes it a little bit fluffy, like a quilt. Okay, it has finished stitching that out. It was very quick. And now we're going to take it off the machine, and we're going to just trim close to this bottom line. We're not going to trim out anything in the seams. We're going to leave that for when we square up and trim up the block when it's all completely done. So I've trimmed my orange piece of fabric, and now I've laid down my second piece of fabric, which is my yellow. And I've changed my thread to a yellow thread to match that as well. And the same procedure is going to tack down the piece of fabric, and it's going to make the quilting lines. So here we go. So that is finished that part. So I'm going to take the hoop off the machine, do my trimming, and come back to put down the third piece of fabric. So I've laid down my third color, which is actually fabric number 1. It's a little bit of a slightly off-white color, and I've changed my thread to match that. And this is going to do exactly the same thing as it did with the other pieces. It's going to tack down that piece of fabric, and then it's going to put some quilting lines across it. Then I'm going to take it out of the hoop. I'm going to trim the top border, and then we're going to do an embroidery stitch across that line at the top, because that's a raw edge, and the embroidery stitches will encase the raw edges and keep them from fraying. So we'll just let this finish. It's going across and doing the first quilting line, as you can see. And I need to trim a thread off. I don't recommend you do this. Don't do what I'm about to do, because it can be dangerous. When you're trimming excess threads from something that's being tacked down, you should stop your machine and trim it as well, because you don't want to get your hands in the way, or you don't want to accidentally knock the hoop. That would put it out of alignment. Like I said, do as I say, don't do as I just did. Okay. So it is finished stitching that out. I'm going to take it and trim that top line off, and then the machine is going to do an embroidery stitch across the join between fabric 1 and fabric 2, and it's in the same color that I have been using on this last piece, so I don't need to change thread colors at this point. So I've done the trimming, and I've put the hoop back into the machine, and now it's doing its embroidery stitch across that join between fabric 1 and fabric 2. And it is a satin stitch, but what it usually does first in a satin stitch is it does a zigzag stitch to hold down the two pieces, and then it'll come back and finish it off with a satin stitch. So we'll let it just go to the end of this and let it get started on the satin stitch, and then I'll come back and show you exactly what that looks like. So I've taken the piece out of the hoop, and what I'm going to do now is trim this all up. The first thing I want to do is get rid of my stabilizer. So I'm going to use my By George ruler, and it has this little lip on here that makes this very easy. So you just lift up your fabric. Your stabilizer is flat on your cutting mat. Line that edge up right against the seam line, and then just use your rotary cutter to cut away the stabilizer. And we're going to do that on all 4 sides. Be careful that you don't cut into your fabric. You're only wanting to remove the stabilizer. And the last side. Okay, so stabilizer is removed. Now we're going to trim the seam allowance, and we want 1/4 inch. Now, a lot of times on these pieces, they call for 1/2 inch, but on this particular pattern, they're saying 1/4 inch, so I'm going to stick to what they're talking about. So on my By George trimmer, I do have a 1/4 inch line on here. ignore the masking tape. That's for 1/2 inches. I put it on there because that's what usually they ask you to do, but in this case they're saying just to use a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to line up the 1/4 inch seam line on the ruler with that outside stitch line, if I can see it. Yes, actually I'm going to do it from this side because less fabric for me to cut. Go to that last line. Now, just a note here, I think what they're doing is they're doing it, no, they're not doing it from the back side. I thought they were doing it from the back side. They are not. They're doing it from the right side up. Okay, I've got my ruler lined up. Go over here, do the same. Little tricky to see sometimes depending on the color of the line, of the stitch line. There it is. Want to keep it straight, so take your time. Because you don't want to cut into that stitch line or you're basically screwed. Okay, along that line. And the last one. Get rid of that excess fabric. And there we have it. We have the first block all done. So you can see that the nice finish here on the embroidery on the satin stitch to encase the raw edges, and it's all nicely laid out and ready to go. Now this is piece A according to the chart, and if you remember I showed you this chart and it shows you right here, and this is the piece we just completed, A. So we have many more to go in this row, and we're doing them by rows. So I need to do B, C, D, and E, and basically these are all done in exactly the same way as this first block. Now, you saw my original plan for this, where I'm going to add some embroidered and appliqued pieces. However, there aren't any of these according to my plan that are in this particular row, so I don't need to worry about that right now. But I do want to mark this as A. So I'm going to take one of my alphabetes. Oops, let me get in the shot here. Sorry. Okay, one of my alphabetes, and I'm just going to attach it to the corner. And that piece is done. 4 more to go. Also, while I'm talking about organizing pieces and labeling them, I do label my fabric as I use it too. So same thing, I use my alphabetes. This is fabric 1, fabric 2, and fabric 3. So it's not really a problem with this pattern to distinguish which colors until we get into the 2-tone blues and 3-tone greens. Then that might help keep me straight. So I'm going to go off and I'm going to do the blocks B, C, D, and E in the same manner as I did this block, and then I'll come back. So I have finished the first row and sewed it all together. So now I'm working on the second row, and you can see it's slightly different color scheme. And I've taken 3 out of the 5 tiles. I have sewn them together, and I am centering the gnome Gothic figures in the center of that. Now this is going to look different than my mock-up that I'm showing you here because it's going to be a little bit smaller. So I'm not sure how I'm going to work around that, because there's no way that I can make this particular embroidered pattern extend over multiple blocks and then sew it together. It's just not designed that way. So I'm trying this, and we'll see how this looks, and then I'll figure out the rest of the design components. And up here on the wall, you can see there's the bottom row, and the row I'm working on right now where there's a gap is the centerpiece here that's going to have the gnome Gothic design on it. Okay, so I'm going about this in a sort of a backwards way.
my original plan for the layout of what I'm going to put on here isn't going to work out the way I thought it would, because these images, I have a lot of space here. As you can see, this is just the first 2 rows of this wall hanger. So I've come up with another gnome design, and I have mounted this into my largest hoop, and I've used my magnetic clips to hold it down, and I've got a layer of, actually 2 layers of no-show mesh underneath this that are actually hooped to keep them steady. And I'm going to use this design that's a gnome on a bike. And I've got one, I'm going to have it going this way, and then my idea is to have one going this way to fill in this big space down here. So that's my theory. We'll see how this works out. My biggest fear is that this is going to jump out of the hoop in the process. If it does that, I may be pretty much screwed. So I'll show you the result, whatever that will be. So I changed my mind about how I was going to hoop this. Instead of hooping the stabilizer and then laying this on top and then holding it down with the magnets, I went the opposite route. I've hooped the actual wall hanging itself using the magnets, and then I'll float the stabilizer underneath that. Now, the question is, do I really need the stabilizer? Well, I may not. There's enough layers of things here that the stitches can go through, but I'm going to put it on anyways as a safeguard, and I'm going to hope this doesn't pop out of the hoop. Because as I said before, if this pops out of the hoop, I'm in deep trouble. So I changed my mind. I decided that instead I would use the magnetic hoop. Now, I never use this thing. I considered it a complete waste of money. So I'm hoping this will work. This is the one by Dime. Don't invest in it. It's way too expensive. And like I said, I never use it, but I'm hoping this is going to be strong enough to hold this hoop down, this piece down. And I'm going to shrink the design by about 20% because I think it's a little too big. And my goal is that it's going to put it right in here in the center, and it'll all be fine and dandy. We'll see what happens.
So here we go with my first color. I've got everything positioned where I think I want it. And, well, here goes nothing. Okay, one thing I'm not liking right now is, and it's hard for you to see it on the camera, but it looks a little sparse, and I'm wondering, because of the thickness, because it's going over a satin stitch there in the join, whether I should do this on top once again and see if that makes a difference, and that's what I'll try. By going over it a second time, it did come out a little bit better. There's still a couple of little minor gaps. We'll see what happens when I get the other colors on this. Those may get filled in if there's some overlap between pieces of the design. And if it really bothers me at the end, I do have fabric markers that I can just touch up on a few of the spots, which might help as well. This is not the right way to do this, and I'm quite aware of that, but this is what I get for not planning well enough ahead in this design. So I'm going to carry on here and see if I can get the rest of the design down without incident, fingers crossed, and I'll show you the final result then.
So that turned out pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with how that it stayed in the hoop and everything. I didn't have any problems with the magnetic hoop, which was surprising, but it did work pretty good. And so I think now you're getting a bit of a flavor of what it is I'm trying to create. I'm going to put the two gnomes, I'm going to flip them horizontally and put them on the other side, coming from the opposite direction. And then I'll carry on with the next layers up. And I do have some things that I want to put up there. So it's not exactly, as I said, the way I first pictured it, but that's okay. It's coming out pretty nice, I think, so far. So completed the bottom part now, and you can see I added the gnomes on the bicycles going both ways towards each other. So that's the bottom part of the scene. Now we can finish the next row, which is the third row, and you can see I have two of the panels there done. And I'll figure out then what's going to go on those before I sew them together. That would make life a lot easier than the way I did this bottom one. But the magnetic hoop that I used for this did hold on to it pretty well, which I was surprised at. So I've got the third background landscape row done, but I didn't sew the pieces together yet because I think I'm going to put some more gnomes in the background on each of those. But I'm going to vary their height so they look like they're further away in the distance than the gnomes here up front on the bicycles and the ones in front of the farmhouse. And to give it a little bit of depth. That's my theory. We'll see how that works out. Okay, so I've picked my design, which you've already seen, that I'm going to put in these blocks that are the third row. And I'm going to vary the size, but I had a problem. Well, it wasn't really a problem, but I needed to use this hoop that you see this mounted in right now, and it's a little bigger than this piece. So it means I can't clamp it down in the hoop. So I wanted it to stay stable, at least until the first initial stitches got into it to anchor it down. So I did something I've never done before, and you got to be very careful with this. I pinned it. I pinned it to my stabilizer. The stabilizer is hooped, but I used a pin here and one I put in the bottom, which you can't see at the moment. Let's move it there, down here. And that's holding it down. Now I've already started stitching here and that'll hold it down, but I'll leave the pins in for a little longer, but I'm making sure that the pins are not in the way of wherever this needle goes. And I kind of moved the needle all the way around through the pattern or through the file without stitching anything, just to see where it was going to go. And I even did, and you can't see it, it's under this, I did a basting line for the outline of the pattern where it's going to fall, so I knew where I could put this piece on top. So I'm going to stitch this all out, and it's going to take it about 75 minutes to do that, or a little bit longer, because there are 25 color changes in this little one. And then I'll show you what that looks like when it's finished. Okay, so I picked the wrong color, and I thought I would show you how I'm going to correct that without trying to rip out all my stitches. You can see on that little border under the hat, and these other ones are supposed to be the hands and the nose. I picked a really bright pink, and I just thought it doesn't look right at all. So I've chosen another color, which is the color that I used on the gnomes in the other pieces I created for their facial features and, body parts. And
I'm just going back over it with that new color. And you can see it covers up the old color very well. So if you ever run into that problem where you've picked the wrong color and you go, uh-oh, well, you can stitch over it. And if you don't like how well it covers up, here it's covering it up pretty well, you can go over it twice. Not a problem. Your needle will go through that many thicknesses of it without any problem.
So as you can see, I got my gnomes embroidered onto the middle section of the quilt or of the wall hanging. And I also added a sunflower in there as well. I've also got the other two rows, the row which would be technically row 1 and row 2, all done, the basic background pieces. That's all the blues with a little bit of purple in there. And now I am going to put some embroidery on it, and I found a file I really like that is of butterflies, but they're floating, and I'm thinking of filling that space up there with these butterflies that are like hovering above the whole scene. That's what I think I'll do next, but I'm not going to put these sections together before I do that. I'm going to figure out where I want to put the placement of the butterfly, and I might have to do an experimental or a prototype one on a scrap square of fabric just to see what that will look like, and then I'll figure out the placement of it. That's the next stage.
Okay, so I have done a little prototype and decided I like the design of this butterfly with the little swirls coming out from the bottom of it. And so I took 4 of the panels, 2 in the second row, 2 in the first row, joined them together so I have a square, and I lined this butterfly up with it. And it's at the tail end of the process, so we'll just turn it on here so you can see what I'm talking about. And I think this is going to work really well. And my plan is to take 4 of the blocks on the opposite side of the wall hanging and flip the design horizontally so that the butterfly will be coming in from the other direction on that side of the wall hanging as well. So I'll show you what this all looks like when it's finished stitching this design out, and I'll put it back up on the design wall so you get a better sense of what I'm going to be doing.
So here's my progress so far. I got those 2 rows at the top with the butterflies done, and I've sewn them together. I have not sewn them to the bottom 3 rows yet because I'm thinking of taking those same butterflies and having one on either side of the American Gothic gnomes in the center so that they would come down around and kind of frame that in a little bit. And then I think it might be finished. So that's going to take some doing because I've already sewn those panels together. So I may pull out the magnetic hoop for this. We shall see. So at this stage, I've gone back to the first 3 rows that I already had sewn together. I wanted to add these butterfly embroidery to this big section. Now, if I'd really thought this through and planned it out better, I would have a smaller piece that I could put in the hoop to do the embroidery, but I didn't. So I have this huge piece under here. This is almost like trying to quilt a quilt in the hoop. So what I had to do is reorient my embroidery of the butterfly so that I could have the bulk of this over here. And you notice that I've got some big clips on this, and this rolled up so that it's taking the weight as much as I can off of the piece, because otherwise it might flip the hoop. You'll also notice I'm using the magnetic hoop for this. Now, I very seldom use my magnetic hoop. I am not a big fan of it, but in this case it seems to work very, very well. So I've got my butterfly embroidery file, or pattern, I guess you call it, placed where I want it. I had to flip it around to get it in the right orientation because this is now upside down here in order to keep the bulk of this piece over on this side away from the arm in my embroidery machine. And right now it's working along very nicely. So I'm going to finish this one up, put another one of these on the opposite side, and then I'll be able to take the 2 big pieces of this wall hanging and sew them together. So I have finished doing all the embroidery on this piece, so you can see the butterflies at the bottom here where I put those. And I got them fairly well lined up for spacing. Might be a little off, but that's okay. Butterflies don't necessarily fly in a straight line. Yeah, I'm not going for realism. But there you go. So now I need to take that top piece and the bottom piece and sew those together, and I'll show you what it looks like when they're sewn together. So here's the top all finished. I have all the panels sewn together. So what do we do from there? And actually, to be honest, I am loving it. I am loving it. It's a bit whimsical. It's fun, I think. Anyways, but now what do I want to do? Well, I want to put backing on this, and I've already picked out my backing fabric, and I'll show that to you in a bit. It has gnomes on it, and I've had it for a while. And I am going to also bind this when I have it finished as well. Probably using the same fabric as I'm going to use on the backing. And I'm going to have to do stitch in the ditch to adhere the backing fabric to the top. The one thing I'm not sure on is, should I put batting on this? This is really not a quilt, it is a wall hanging. So I want it to lay fairly flat, but I've got a lot of seams, I've got a lot of embroidery happening on the back. The back is a mess because there's stabilizer on it and all kinds of things. So I'm thinking to even it out, I should use maybe a little bit of batting. Now I could use battleizer on this, but my battleizer is not going to be wide enough for this. So I would have to piece two pieces of battleizer together, which is not a big problem. I can do that. And I may do that because I'm thinking batting is just going to make it too fluffy, and I don't want it fluffy. So I'll make that decision, get started on that, and show you what the end result is. Okay, so I have my backing on here, and I did decide to use battleizer because it's a lower loft batting between the layers, and I've trimmed it up, and now all I have to do is put the binding on it, and I'm making the binding out of the same fabric as the backing, which you will see later on. I think it's turning out really nice, and I'm surprised by this because when I started it, as I've told you, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't really have a very definite plan. I had an idea, but no real definite plan. So, last step, put the binding on, that'll be finished, and then I'll show you the end result. So I have finished the complete wall hanging now. It has the binding on it, which matches the backing. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. Now I have to find a place where to hang it up. But there you go. You can create an original piece of art by just using existing embroidery files and combining them together. I would suggest that you sit down with a piece of paper and plan out exactly where you want things to go, so you don't have, you know, a lot of bulk in your hoop like I did with this. But that worked out okay, but I would plan it better if I was to do it another time. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little, I don't know, demo. I think it's more of a demo than a tutorial. So thanks for watching.
Okay, so I hope that inspires you to, think outside of the box when you're getting embroidery files, and think about what you can do with taking those elements together to create something new. And I hope you also heeded some of my warnings and learned from my awkwardness in doing it. Planning is crucial. I thought I had a plan. Well, you saw how that worked out. Okay, so we did have one comment this week that I want to address, because we have said this many times before, but I don't think people maybe didn't hear it, you missed it or whatever. And here's the comment. It said, I was wondering, what kind of fabric do you use for all your beautiful shirts? Because I would like to try to do one. Well, Walter, what do you make your shirts out of?
Quilting cotton.
Yeah. Why?
I am basically for the patterns because
which he means printed, not.
Yeah, I mean you can use a lot of other types of fabrics. You can use as poplin, or you can use a cotton polyester mix. But those types of fabrics that I've looked at where they are official shirting fabrics are boring.
Mm-hmm.
Their lines and their squares and their checks and their, if you want to make a check shirt, that's fine, use that. But the reason I use the quilting cotton, well, first of all, it holds up well when you wash it.
These shirts, both of these shirts that we're wearing right now have been washed many times, and they still, and we don't iron them.
Yeah.
We pull them out of the dryer.
I'm light. Sometimes I'll iron the collars, but I mean, other than that, I don't usually iron them, and they stand up pretty well. There's only one fabric I used once that didn't stand up very well, but other than that, if you use good quality quilting cotton, they usually stand up pretty good for washing, and they come in a variety of patterns.
Yeah, you have much more selection using quilting cotton than you do any other fabric for making shirts with it. So, in fact, today I was wearing this shirt when I dropped off my quilt, and some ladies saying, "Oh, I love your shirt." Now, I don't know if they had enough time to really study it to realize what's on this shirt. This is what I call my weed shirt, because those are marijuana leaves.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I necessarily, that we don't really do marijuana or anything like that. We prefer LSD, but no, that's not it. But I like the colors in this one. And
Yeah,
to make sure.
nice, it looks nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I told, yeah, my husband makes them. So, and then I walked away. So, in my dust. But anyways, yeah, so that's all they are. It's quilting cotton, and it works, as Walter's already told you. Okay, so I think that's it for us this week. Tune in to Stephen and Walter live on Sunday. We're going to talk on Sunday a little bit about Pride Month, because it is Pride Month, and this year it's going to be a little different across North America, thanks to he whose name should not be spoken, as we know. And yeah, we're going to talk all about that, and maybe I will know the results of the contest and whether or not I got a fluffy ribbon or just a lot of anguish and heartbreak. So stay tuned for the joy or the tears from it all. So see you later. Bye for now.
Bye for now.